There comes a moment in your life where you have to sit down, break open the custard creams and ask, why does this situation feel so familiar? Not in that comforting way that something familiar reminds you of home, but the one where everything you do seems as if it inevitably leads to the same outcome. You feel more self-aware now. You understand love languages, red flags, and despite it all, your relationships play out the same way. So why does your love life seem like it's stuck on loop? Well, let's talk about that. I'm Sam, and this is The Connection Room. The psychologist William Swan developed an idea in the early 1980s called the self-verification theory. According to Swan, human beings don't just seek love, they seek confirmation. Not confirmation of who they want to be, but who they think they already are. The self-verification theory posits that people seek to confirm their positive or negative self-image because people are incentivized to find consistent threads between how they view themselves and how others view them as well. We do this even if the views we hold are unfavorable. So if deep down you carry beliefs like, I am hard to love, or I have to suffer in order to get validation, you can find yourself magnetized to platonic and romantic relationships that reinforce this narrative. This isn't because you get some weird joy from seeking relationships that treat you this way, but because it provides a consistent narrative about who you are. This in turn makes the world that you live in more manageable and predictable. Thinkers like Otto Kernberg give us a different lens on repeating relationship patterns. He didn't see repetition as self-sabotage, but as an unconscious attempt at resolution. So to provide a little context, before Kernberg, Sigmund Freud framed repetition as a drive to reenact trauma, even when it caused pain. Over time, this idea was flattened into something like this. You keep choosing the same thing because you're addicted to toxic partners. Because on some level you must enjoy being disrespected. I mean, how many times have you sat with people you know and told them that a relationship is over, only to have them say something along the lines of, well, duh. You keep dating the same people and hoping for something different. You love the pain really. This is a you problem. And look, they are right that it is a you problem, but it's not in the way that they think. You see, Kernberg, along with later thinkers, argue that repetition is not driven by a desire for self-sabotage, but by a hope for repair. The story being told is, if I can just get this version of my story to end differently, I can finally be at peace with myself. So you end up choosing emotionally unavailable people, or the person who needs fixing, all because your psyche is trying to force the ending of Conan onto the last Fast and Furious movie in the hope that it can sell the plot twist. And that's why so many people say things like, I understand my patterns, but they don't understand why it keeps happening. It's because repetition isn't happening at the level of the conscious belief, it's happening at the level of emotional memory. Kernberg was careful to emphasize our nervous systems recognize familiar emotional rhythms, and our bodies interpret that as love, even when our minds know that it isn't. You're not falling for the person, you're falling into an emotional role that validates who you believe you are. So I hate to be the one to break it to you, but attraction is conditioned. This Hollywood idea of a spontaneous spark is more like pattern recognition. Work done by Harville Hendrix, cool name by the way, and Helen LaKelly Hunt suggests that we are unconsciously drawn to patterns that resemble emotional patterns of our early caregivers. It's not quite Freud's Oedipal complex, but they make the argument that as children we adapt to our caregivers' emotional availability. We learn what earns their closeness and what triggers their withdrawal. These adaptations don't just vanish into thin air when we become adults. They crystallize into our perceptions of what love and affection looks like. So when you meet someone who can create these familiar emotional atmospheres, whether it is positive or negative, your nervous system seeks to embrace what is instantly recognizable. So it's not a spark, it's pattern recognition. And I hope it's starting to make sense that long before we ever learn love languages, red flags, or dating standards, our nervous system is quietly learning via our experiences what kind of connections feel familiar and meaningful to us. The psychiatrist Alan Shaw gives us more insight by suggesting that some relationships activate your nervous system, creating a cascade of emotions that keep you alert, anxious, and invested, while others regulate your nervous system and offer consistency and emotional steadiness. He called the first relationship style activation and the second one regulation, and concluded that if you grew up around emotional unpredictability, activation made you feel alive. Regulation feels flat, suspicious, drier than a mouthful of Jacob's cream crackers with nothing to help it go down. Ew. This can cause you to mistake emotional intensity for emotional intimacy, cloaking chaos under the guise of chemistry. But let's get it right, intensity doesn't mean that you're close. Now, many of us wipe the custard creams off our faces and say, I've done the work, I've read the books, so why am I still so attracted to this type of person? And the honest answer is because understanding something doesn't immediately rewire your desire. Hey, that rhymes. Go me. So let me tell you a secret. I have a killer sweet tooth. But I understand that in order to have a balanced diet, I need to regulate my sweet tooth. And yet, yes, who had cake yesterday? Yeah, we're all a work in progress. So yeah, you can know something or someone is bad for you and still feel pulled towards that. Because insight lives in the mind, but attraction lives down the road in your body. Your attraction doesn't obey your insight just because you learnt what emotional dysregulation means. Like most work, it takes time, repetition, and patience. Growth isn't linear, it's layered. Some layers are superficial and will take you days. Others are extremely dense and take years of work and attention. You don't just shed patterns you spent your whole life learning, but you can learn to slowly outgrow most of them. Look, here's the bitter medicine that I have to hit you with. Breaking the cycle doesn't happen by meeting the right person. I know what the movies say, but that idea keeps us waiting. It implants power into others. The real shift happens when we realize that chemistry isn't a compass, it's simply a sensation. And much of our sensations are shaped by our history. Cycle breaking looks less dramatic than the movies and books make it out to be. It's slower and more internal. Just because you are familiar with something doesn't mean it's good for you. When you take things a little slower, you see more. You'll be able to see who calms you, who's bringing you stability and consistency instead of emotional whiplash. Sparks are great in the beginning of a relationship when everything is brand new. But when the dopamine rush fades, peace and stability is what quality long-term relationships are built on. And when you've nabbed yourself a peace bringer, you'll realize that they don't make you audition for their love. They don't require you to over-explain or prove your worth. These people believe that you are who they want to be with. You'll see over time that love isn't a reward for going through suffering. Love can meet you where you stand and walk you up the road for a healthier and more balanced journey. The unfamiliar is always more unsettling, but you have to be willing to torch the old stories that you have held as a comfort blanket. Stories like love that isn't dramatic isn't real love, because ultimately those narratives have not served you. These stories protected you once, but you are an adult now, and therefore you need different things. If you keep attracting the same partner, it doesn't mean that you are cursed. And if you don't take anything else from this video, please take this. You didn't choose these relationships because you enjoy the pain of them. You were drawn to them because at some point in your life, certain patterns taught your nervous system this is how connection works. And when that pattern keeps repeating, the first instinct is often to look outwards, to find someone new, as if they're holding the missing key that will finally unlock the door to love, peace, and a fulfilling relationship. But the doors that you are trying to walk through don't open with someone else's key. They open when you realize that some stories you learned about love early on no longer serve the life that you're trying to build right now. Patterns don't break because you understand them. They break because you outgrow internal narratives and behaviors that once made sense. And when that shift happens, relationships stop feeling like an audition. It's no longer like Simon Cowell with that red button judging your worth, waiting for you to perform well enough to be chosen. Love becomes something more steady, like a well. Something you can return to and draw from daily, letting it restore you rather than drain you. And when you're ready, it's something you can share, not to prove yourself, but because you finally have enough. So let me know what skill you use to outgrow old behaviors in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video on the way out. I'm Sam, and until the next time, make some room.